Good morning, America. Good afternoon, Europe, and good night, Australia. And wherever you are in the world, great time of day to you. And we are SAMexpert on our channel, SAMexpert TV, and we are back with the subject that we didn't touch for, Daryl, correct me if I'm wrong, I think almost a year, which is enterprise agreement renewals. Because I think it could seem, but we agree that it's probably not true, that the focus really shifted from enterprise agreement to other things, Microsoft. And Microsoft played a big role in that. But it may seem so. But Daryl, and I have, so quick introduction. I'm Alexander Golev. With me, I have Daryl Ullman. We are leads. Daryl is the negotiation lead. This is why he's going to be talking today more about negotiations. It's basically his event. I'll be asking questions. And my name is Alexander Golev. I'm the consulting and services lead in the company called SAMexpert, which is an independent Microsoft cost reduction consultancy. I'm simplifying this. We do lots of things, but the final product is we help you pay less and get more on Microsoft. Very focused. And we don't sell Microsoft licenses, therefore the advice we give is completely independent. So Daryl, it may seem that enterprise agreement renewals have lost CFO's attention and went to maybe low-level management. But is it actually true? Because judging by what's going on, especially the Q4 2024, and right now, it doesn't seem so. It seems like it's still pretty much a very big deal for organizations, especially enterprises.
I definitely don't think that it's lost focus. What I believe happened over the last 12 to 24 months was very much Microsoft's intention, and that was to move the focus to Azure and to MACC contracts, as they are in monetary value, they are actually higher than enterprise agreements. And they've just defocused the entire negotiation view for organizations from EAs to MACC agreements, where actually EAs are still one of the biggest IT expenses within an organization. So CIOs didn't lose focus, they just moved the focus slightly. And I would say that they moved the responsibility thinking that lower management could deal with EA renewals and they could free up time to deal with other areas of concern. I think they made a big mistake. What happened is that the wrong people that that were not adequately trained or have the knowledge and experience to deal with complex enterprise agreements dealt with them or still dealing with them. And as a result, organizational costs are going up. And what I just think we're seeing now is the understanding by CFOs that they need to re-engage and refocus.
I like that you mentioned the costs are going up. One of the first questions I remember when I was engaged in my first enterprise agreement negotiation, that was over 10 years ago, when I was moved from the position of a licensing consultant to a negotiation consultant. One of the first questions I received from the client, it's an obvious question, like, why we had 9 million a year before, and the new Microsoft's proposal is 5 million more. Why the jump? Why do organizations have to deal with those increases? And please be specific to 2025 as well, and how different it is to 2024.
So, one, price lists have increased over the last 3 to 5 years. And let's not forget that organizations negotiate once every 3 or 5 years. So most contracts are 3 years. I'll say the majority are 3 years, but there are quite a few 5-year contracts out there. So imagine you haven't negotiated in 3 years or 5 years, and you've basically, as I said, moved your focus and moved on. I won't say you've forgotten about your enterprise agreement renewal, but it's not consequential once you have that budgeted. And then the renewal comes up. you have got no idea what's happening in the enterprise agreement world, in the Microsoft contractual world, because it's not your business. And somebody puts together a budget for the, just say 25, based on the expiring EA, has no experience in budgeting and in Microsoft, hasn't been following the Microsoft financial environment, and under budget. And I've seen it so many times. The CFO gets a budget, and then when they get the renewal quote, everybody's in absolute shock, because it's not another 5 or 8 or 10% cost increase. It's 30% on average, even higher.
It's
And
huge.
that's when the shock hits. And that's the big difference, as so much has changed: profiles, cost increases, exchange rate fluctuations, Microsoft decreasing discounts, new products that have come in. Everybody thought Copilot was going to be great, so organizations started to play around with it. High promises, but then when the bill comes in, it's like total shock. And I think that is that's what we're going to see more and more in 2025. We started to see that shock effect in 24, and I think 25 is going to be even more painful. And the focus is going to come back to EAs, and I think it's also moving. It's not only from an EA, because the whole Microsoft spend is increasing. It's the unified support that's linked back to EA spend and your Azure spend. Azure spend is just growing exponentially because, I'll be blunt, nobody knows how to manage cost optimization. Um, uh, I heard a very interesting. It's not my phrase, but one of my colleagues said to me that a CIO can't sign off on a PO above $10,000, for example. Needs multiple approvals. But a Azure architect can, in effect, engage a certain area of Azure and commit to $500,000 per year, and he's not accountable and needs no approvals. So I think that is the biggest. I would almost say, I'm a very blunt person, but I'm trying to just restrain myself, as you know, Sasha. Uh,
Mhm.
Myth and underestimation of the
Mhm.
power of what Microsoft has actually accomplished in the market from a pure business perspective. And organizations are just years behind.
I want to second on one thing that CIO can commit to 500,000. I
A
think
CI can't commit to 500,000. A Azure architect can.
Azure Architect. Yeah, I'm just thinking about all you can eat commitments, because effectively procurement is usually the gatekeeper for the CFO, and procurement controls assesses good procurement, assesses the value of something being bought. All the expenses are in a good procurement are really justified. And when it comes to the cloud, we have all you can eat agreements. We commit to spend 10 million. What's the return? What's the value? Because when you have that pot of money, you can either fill it in with jewels, or just limestone. It's That's the problem. And procurement, unless you have FinOps, there's no control. And I think
No, but
Azure
even if you have
Marketplace.
FinOps, there's a big misunderstanding of what FinOps is.
Mhm.
Not cost optimization.
It's not.
I know that we're a bit differing from EAs, but it's very important to understand, because it comes back ultimately back to your enterprise agreement renewal, to your strategy, to your how you prepare for it. With FinOps, and this is, to my belief, the biggest cover up. A cover up worth billions of dollars is that if you think that you have a FinOps organization set up, then you have a cost optimization process and organization set up. You don't. Um, and what we're seeing is that even companies with really good FinOps don't have any incentive for cost optimization, because one of the biggest problems going back to MACC agreements is that a lot of organizations have overcommitted. And when you overcommit, you actually got no incentive to cost optimize. You want to just utilize and utilize and utilize and just grow that spend. That's one of the problems. There are multiple. I can give you a whole list of a
Mhm.
dozen different issues. So there's actually billions of dollars out there of spend that is just going in Microsoft's direction. They're not doing anything for it. They're actually just sitting back and counting the money. I'm not saying anything bad about Microsoft. I have the most appreciation for them. The problem is with the end customers, that they are just they've just lost touch and control um, on how to manage that. And
That's
that's why I
that's a
think
big statement.
CFOs are going to come back to EAs this year, even though I won't say it's a drop in the sea compared to a MACC agreement, but it's still substantial money, and the budget is just not there.
So staying on the subject of Azure and Max, but returning to the subject of negotiating the EA, I think the questions that I will be asking, okay, so how does Azure commitments and Max and Azure consumption without Max, how does this affect the overall strategy of Azure negotiations in a bad way? And what can we do? Imagine we are CFOs. What can we do to turn it upside down and use that for our advantage? So how can we leverage the shifted focus on Azure to get a
It's
better deal from Microsoft?
it's a very it's actually it's a good question, but it's a very complex answer, um, because ultimately every organization is in a different stage in their Azure, you want to call it their cloud journey. And it really depends when you started that cloud journey, where your MACC is, where you're positioned within that MACC commitment, what are the terms and conditions of that MACC, um, and does it even co-terminate with your EA, or is it a completely separate termination date? Can you even leverage it towards your EA? So the first thing that I recommend organizations to do is to look at their overall spend with Microsoft. So when they start preparing for the EA, it's not just the EA that needs to be on the table, at least from a discussion perspective. I'm not saying you need to negotiate the MACC if it's not up for renewal, but if you don't have that presented, that overall spend to Microsoft, with Microsoft understanding your overall value to them and putting in various strategies, so you can actually put in strategies, long-term strategies, to have an impact on your EA based on future consumption of your Azure or future project migrations, um, third-party alternatives, not only to your Azure, to Azure, but also to security within your EA. So it's organizations that start late in their preparation for the renewals. That happens too often, even after 20 years of negotiating EAs. Organizations move too slowly and they start preparing too late in the game, and they don't prepare alternatives. So there is a very standard negotiation term called BATNA, and I'm sure most people have never heard of it. It's the basics of negotiation. It's the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. You can't enter a negotiation, any negotiation, without a good alternative. And still with EAs, negotiating with Microsoft, there are alternatives. And if you don't present an alternative, you've actually lost the negotiation. I'm not saying you're not going to get a small discount, but in general, you've lost the negotiation. I still hear this from many customers. I just got off a call earlier with a healthcare provider, very big healthcare provider in North America, and very high level people, executives, one level under the CIO, and a spend of uh, an average spend of around 20 million per year on the EA, and much more on their Azure spend. And their entire approach is an approach of there's not much we can do negotiating with Microsoft. They are
20.
so big. How can we impact the results of the negotiation? It's already a known result. So with that negotiation attitude out of the gate, of course you're not going to get the best deal possible, and of course you're going to leave money on the table today and future cost increases. So that's the worst case scenario. That type of attitude, where smaller organizations that I've worked with that have the right attitude, I call it a negotiation attitude,
Mm.
get far better deals than large organizations. Just as an example, again, it really depends on the persona and on the business culture and on the personal culture. So it's not even about licensing. It's not even about knowing Microsoft or not knowing Microsoft. It goes back to the good old fundamentals of negotiating a large contract.
You just said about small organizations, and I immediately remembered that client from the States that came to us, and they said we only consume 1 million in Microsoft licenses a year, and normally, below 5 million. For those who don't know, it's very difficult to talk to Microsoft. But they were very aggressively positioning themselves, and they were prepared to fight, and they got a very good deal. So
Relatively, exactly.
I agree with
Relatively
you.
for their size, I got a very good deal. Correct.
Yeah.
Because it's about attitude. It's about attitude, and it's about how you position yourself in that specific geography with that specific Microsoft team. Ultimately, as I said, it's a lot about fundamentals, and a lot of people have forgotten about the fundamentals. Like, fundamentals are out the door, and it's about almost begging for a good deal. Um, so if you have the fundamentals, the right attitude, you can do so much. Even today, with declining discounts and with increases in costs overall, you can still get a relatively very good deal if you negotiate and you prepare. It's just a question of how you want to approach it.
Daryl, slightly off script. I just received a message from my friend George on WhatsApp. He's driving, so he's listening to us on YouTube. He's not watching. He doesn't want to see our two bald faces. And he's asking, guys, you talk about the diminishing discounts. Can you give us a rough estimate? So what an organization say of like 3,000, 5,000 seat, uh, what they used to get and what they can expect now in 2025 as the starting point within, I'm not saying final discount for Microsoft, starting point in the conversation with Microsoft.
So I'm always very prudent. I'm very careful about throwing out discounts.
It's a
Um,
provocative question, I know. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's not that I don't want to disclose it, but discounts depend on just really on so many different factors, and I don't want to mislead anyone. So what I want to say is that discounts have dropped by over 50%. So if an organization of 3,000 users had a really good deal 3 years ago, and they had between, I don't know, 12 and 20% discount off level B, maybe
Mm-hmm.
price
Mm-hmm.
list, just say as an example. they should expect half of that discount if they are lucky. Okay, lucky means if they just ask for it, and that is due to the fact that whoever jumped on the E5 train, rightfully or not rightfully, rightfully I mean if they actually utilized the E5 security components and everything that goes under there, and they didn't just jump into E5 because the discounts were really good 3 years ago, they are actually in the worst position possible. Microsoft is leveraging, and I'm being very delicate here. Microsoft is leveraging their position in the marketplace with Office, with Microsoft 365, Office 365, or whatever goes underneath that. And as an effect, as we can see that they are reducing on-premise versions, additions, rollouts, features. It's all about the cloud. Why? Because they've done a really good job, and organizations are almost captive organizations. The alternatives are diminishing, and when you don't have alternatives or diminishing alternatives, the supplier, from their perspective, rightfully so, again from Microsoft perspective, has no real reason to provide you with compelling discount if you don't have a really good business case or a really strong alternative.
Talking about elephant in the room, and you mentioned it a few times, AI. We can't avoid talking about AI. We can't avoid talking about Microsoft committing to invest further, what's 80 billion, if I'm not mistaken, into AI. This money should come from somewhere. And I think this is already a moot point. Everybody talks about it. The reception of Copilot is somewhere lukewarm, if not cold. And lots of enthusiasm that was in 2024 seemed to have disappeared. And I hear this from various angles of various meetings. I very rarely there are success stories, and they mostly come from implementation companies, not from the end clients. So I may be wrong. I don't want to be, held liable for these statements, but this is what my channels deliver. And with Microsoft still positioning AI as a strategic product, Copilot as a strategic product, potentially there'll be, judging by what's going on, pay as you go. Another commitment that undermines procurement. Pay as you go plans for Copilot. I think the focus in 2024 was more about how do we get a discount on Copilot, which was difficult. Now the question is rather, how can this, like a CFO or CIO, how can they leverage the Microsoft's push for AI and at the same time not waste money on it? Because there are so many moving parts. It's not a simple question, but maybe you can somehow simplify this or just give us your thoughts on that matter.
So starting 23, mid 23, there was a huge push starting for Copilot, and it moved into 24, as you said. Copilot / AI, okay, because it was like AI for Microsoft is Copilot, at least currently, for enterprise organizations. And Microsoft was, I won't even say heavily discounting, that would be a joke. They felt so confident in the value of the product that actually discounts were like minimal compared to what you could receive on your overall EA, even for very, very large organizations of hundreds of thousands of users, if you're looking at the user metric currently still. And Copilot was sold to C-level executives using, I would almost say, the most low-level features of running it in Teams and meeting summaries and just trying to cut corners and save time. I don't know if people on the call remember when Microsoft came out 20 years ago with tagging, with tags in Office. Like all of a sudden over a word there was a tag, and if you press that tag, you could get a lot of information either from the web or straight from the web into the document, and like everybody was wowed, this was like, and Microsoft was pushing this feature as the most the best ROI for any CIO, for every C level and for everyone underneath them, to save time just doing the day-to-day work. And Copilot came in very similar to that, to my opinion. Save time through meeting summaries, through actions, and and so on and so on and so on. And a number of organizations bought into it, but they bought in a very small quantity of licenses to play around with. Some over committed, others took a more cautious position. So there's a lot of hype around that, a lot of promises. It hasn't materialized. I'm not a tech expert, I'm a commercial expert. I listen to my customers, I sit with customers every day, a number of times a day, with various customers from around the globe. And I'm hearing the same thing. Copilot hasn't provided the promises Microsoft put out there, and that's the underlining fact. That's it, and it's actually Microsoft's having more challenges selling Copilot than they did a year ago or a year and a half ago, because it just hasn't exploded as they thought. Now, what it means for 2025 for your EA renewal, it means be cautious. As Microsoft was utilizing Copilot to potentially you commit to higher volumes of Copilot, we'll give you a discount on Copilot, and I didn't say it, but we'll also discount your EA if you add in more Copilots. And if you don't add in more Copilot licenses, we won't discount your EA. Again, it was never officially said, or there are various reasons why Microsoft is very cautious around that. But it was done. It's still being done. In 2025, I would say be very cautious even bringing Copilot to the table if you don't have a really, really compelling business case. If you haven't proved the use case, if you do not see the value, if you haven't got that project set out and ready to run day after you sign your EA, don't bring it into the EA negotiations. Microsoft will utilize that. They will leverage that in order to drive additional benefits, that if you remove Copilot during the negotiation stage, you will lose all leverage. And if you don't utilize Copilot and you don't have a good business case, you're actually going to have a hell of a lot of shelfware that you've already paid for many years to come. And that will just set the next cycle of negotiations. So be very careful about Copilot. Be very careful about AI. I'm not saying that AI is going to, it's here. It's going to continue to develop. But I think that we are far, far away from the promises for enterprise organizations at this stage.
Speaking about AI as a leverage, because that's how I formulated my question. So it's a traditional advice. I'm not disclosing any game here. Or was always to consult with somebody who really knows the inside world of Microsoft. And before you negotiate, have leverage by committing to certain, what were they called? Scorecard products. It's a Microsoft internal term, flagship products, the products that people are meted on sales. So I probably won't disclose a secret. It's been said publicly many times that a Microsoft sales representative is not compensated equally from each and every product. On some products, they may not even have any compensation at all. And on some products, they're only compensated from the moment when you start consuming them, not when they sold them to you. So can you give our viewers, Daryl, any advice on what you think are the most obvious 2-3 flagship products in 2025 they should start considering using as a leverage? I'm not saying considering to use or considering, or maybe even using, because obviously it's a no-brainer. If you consider using that as a leverage and you have a good path to implementation and a business case, then why not? So what are these products, and what do you think?
So again, as you said, I don't think it's any market secret these days. So first of all, everything to do with server products is just, it's not interesting. So SQL, Windows, DevTools, all that stuff got no consequence. So if you have it or if you don't have it, if you increase the quantity or the volume, nobody cares anymore. That's one. So don't spend your time there. Waste of time. Ultimately, it's mostly about security products. So everything to do with security, compliance and security. I'll bundle them together because there's E5 compliance and there's E5 security. High on the Microsoft rep scorecard. Everything to do with Dynamics, high on everybody's scorecard. Copilot goes without saying. I said that before. That's the most known secret. That is their biggest target. Again, you need to play that really carefully. And it works actually in the other way, in the other direction as well. So it's not only about adding those products to your EA. And this is where things can get really interesting, is that if you have them in your EA today and you're not utilizing them throughout the organization, so you might have pockets of users that are using some components, others that are not. If it's Power BI, if it's certain compliance products, if it's your internal versus external consultants, or different types of personas out there. If you manage to build up an alternative to even for a certain group of users, where you understand your usage trends and you have a fallback position, that actually is very painful for sales reps. So moving back a step could be as powerful as moving forward. So I know it's always difficult to move backwards, but I always say, one, have you checked to see if you can even move backwards? And let's not forget, there's a lot to do about, again, basic negotiation strategy. What about posture? People forgot about posture. You can build up an alternative, a viable alternative, without even rolling back. You need to be smart. Microsoft's smarter than you. Okay? And if you don't step up your game in 2025, your costs are going to increase. It's as simple as that. If you have the budget and you want to contribute, then contribute. If you care about your budget, your personal targets, then you need to maybe step out of your comfort zone a bit and step up your game.
Unified support. So we often mention that we can leverage overall Microsoft spend to affect unified support negotiations and use other leverages and tactics to optimize that one. Does it work backwards? Can you leverage unified support to get a better EA deal in 2025? You can answer no, or you can give us a long answer.
Very difficult to utilize a unified support contract to leverage your EA. Usually Microsoft, I'll say 99% of sales teams that that sell in the EA and Azure products or suites of products couldn't care they couldn't care about
Okay.
unified support. But when you negotiate, but you still should bring it into the mix, and for the reason being that your unified support costs, if you haven't realized, have doubled or tripled in
Yeah.
the last 3 to 5 years. So you can't neglect unified support. You need to negotiate that. I'm opening up brackets here. You need to aggressively, I mean, aggressively reevaluate the actual need for unified support.
Mm.
And that is also a overlooked component of negotiations. It's not as big as an EA, so it doesn't, of course not, it doesn't get that attention. But when
Hmm.
you look at your support costs that have jumped to Microsoft from, I don't know, just say 1 million a year to 3 million a year, do you actually need that? Are there alternatives out there? Have you really negotiated hardball with Microsoft on that? I would say most organizations don't. Again, it's overlooked. And it's a bit of that same kind of attitude where, well, what can we do? And I'm hearing that more, especially from, um, let me call it veteran negotiators with
Mm.
Microsoft that have negotiated 3, 4, 5 deals, and there are a lot of people out there. I think that they're tired. There is a factor of, well, we need to do this again. I hear this again and again. Well, we've done 3 deals, we've done 5 deals, we've done 6 deals. What can we do different? So, what you can do different is change your attitude. And I'll be very blunt. Bring in external help. I'll be as blunt as possible. That is your additional leverage. That's the secret sauce. Not because that person or that organization knows more than you. Yes, actually, I think they will know more than you. Again, being very open about it. But
It's it's no brainer. If
but
somebody negotiates on a monthly basis, it's different to somebody negotiating on
but
every
it's not
three
only
years.
that, Sasha. I'll tell you what. And I've got quite a few years of experience, so I don't mind being
Hmm.
very blunt about it. It's about motivation. These negotiators do not have the incentive. They don't have that compelling drive anymore to aggressively negotiate. They're tired. And sometimes you need that. You could call it a coach, you could call it a mentor, you could call it somebody that feels obligated to push you because they're getting paid for it. And it doesn't really matter. But you need that additional secret sauce just to motivate you. And these people have so much experience. They know what they're doing. I just think they're tired.
So true. There's one thing. I have a small room, but very many elephants in it. There's one thing that we can't avoid mentioning, and surprisingly, as much as there was a lot of noise in the market, not everybody is aware that November last year, Microsoft published a blog post, just a blog post saying, in 2025, starting January 1st, which means already 15 days ago, 14 days ago, we will stop renewing some of the enterprise agreements. And the way they announced it sounds like a lottery. They didn't tell which exact types of agreements. They mentioned cloud agreements. What does it mean? Every enterprise agreement is now a cloud agreement. The only limitation to the scope is that they mentioned direct markets. So if you're somewhere in, I don't know, Ukraine, you're probably not affected because it's an indirect market. But if you're in the United States is a traditional direct market for Microsoft. Microsoft operates directly with multiple clients in the United States. No size limitations, complete lottery. And they said, we will stop renewing those enterprise agreements. You won't be able to renew your EA. And what are you going to do? We will offer you either MCA-E or CSP. Now, the problems, I will iterate through the problems here, very high level. First of all, there are no price list discounts in the CSP price list. And there's no MCA-E price list as far as I'm aware.
Correct.
So it's the same price list for everyone, with every organization size. So you need to negotiate your discounts that you used to get off your price list. There is even the Azure tenant would have to be effectively moved. How is that going to be implemented? That's a very big question, because Azure through an enterprise agreement and Azure through an MCA
completely different.
may be a big surprise for everyone here. Although the backend is the same, even the APIs and the databases are different. So you can't switch a tenant from EA to MCA. How is that going to work? Licensing rules, without going into details, are just simply different. Costs will go up. And I'm working on a video that will go nitty-gritty. So if you know about our YouTube channel, then it'll be published very soon, where we go through every single licensing, at least every single important licensing difference between those agreements. It may affect your on-premises environments. It may affect your AHub. It may affect your Azure Stack HCI. Sorry, I'm mentioning technical terms. I promise not to. So, but the bottom line is very simple. Every expert agrees it will increase costs. And you may be able to negotiate a discount. But then imagine yourself in a take it or leave it situation. You prepare for a renewal. You send an email to Microsoft and you say, we want to renew our EA. So let's start preparing. What's the deal? And they come back and say 90, 60, 30 days before the renewal, you're on the list of those who can't renew your agreement anymore. And here are your options, MCA, MPSA, whatever else. And you're not prepared for it. You may have been preparing to negotiate your EA, and suddenly you're in a completely different world where the licensing rules are different, and you start using the old terms, the old leverages, and they say, sorry, they don't work anymore in the new framework. Licenses, you can't renew your licenses, you need to buy new subscription licenses. The costs are going up. What will be your advice to almost every organization, I think, in the direct markets right now, in regards to this? What would be the most clever thing they could do?
So it's very new, as you said. It's just starting now, and based on what we've heard in the market and what we are seeing, it will initially affect organizations that are between 500 and 2,500 users that have today what's called the tier A or level A pricing under an EA. Microsoft's been trying for years to move them away from enterprise agreements for years and years and years. And I think they've taken a hard decision that if they don't want to move, we'll move them. And I think the majority are going to be moved to CSP, not to MCA,
MCA-E.
MCA-E.
Enterprise.
Thank you.
MCA Enterprise.
Yeah, MCA Enterprise. Thank you. So the drive is going to be to the channel. Microsoft is trying to move as many of those small organizations, small is relative, but the smaller organizations to the channel. And there are tens of thousands of those organizations out there, even more. And that goes back to what's changing in 2025 and how you prepare for your budget. So if you are unaware of these changes and you're basing your budget on the same metrics of 2024 of your last billing, again, you're going to be in for a pricing shock. So is your CFO, if we go back to that initial CFO discussion. So again, it's a lot about know-how and preparing accordingly. Now, it goes back to what are your alternatives? I'm not saying an EA for smaller organizations is the holy grail anymore. It's not the only licensing option out there. I'm not even sure it's the best licensing option today based on everything out there, and there are alternatives. But you need to be very much aware of one, what is that move going to entail? And Sasha just noted a number of small changes that you'll need to adapt to. So it's not only the cost that's going to increase, and it's going to increase. And you can budget for 20% more on average, maybe slightly more, but I would say I would actually say 30% more if I want to be realistic. And then there's going to be what type of migration cost on top of that. So you need to prepare for that. And if you have the option, if you're almost at 2,500 and you can maybe move to a higher tier level, worthwhile having a look at. Basically, for small organizations, I would say your options are diminishing. I'll be very open and truthful. It's the large organizations that still have a lot of negotiation leverage. Smaller organizations are going to find themselves in a challenging situation going into 2025. I think the most challenging year they've ever had with Microsoft. So I've got no good news for small organizations. Just prepare accordingly, and if you can, just optimize.
I
Optimize,
have
optimize, optimize.
I have a suggestion for small companies. The first thing they need to do is to educate yourselves. Don't ask your CSP. Don't ask, you can ask us, you can ask your CSP, you can ask others. But the most important thing is you need to understand the basics. You need to know half the answer yourselves. So search, crave for information about the differences, watch information channels that share knowledge, learn, get the high level information, because the switch is not going to be painless. Daryl, we have 12 minutes. I wanted to cover a hub quickly, but before that, if we have time left, because I mean it's not a very, very big topic, but I think it's the only technical topic that still kind of concerns professionals these days. We have a few questions from the audience. So Luca is asking, guys, let's say following scenario: European company, 6,000 seats, EA renewal, managed only online services, some amendments, no licensing changes, already full E5. In my view, there is no optimization potential when they know they're active and active disabled users with licenses and so on. What do you say? Full E5, already full E5.
So it's that's just where most organizations get stuck, and they focus on, well, we have E5, no more optimization, we can't do anything. That's where I start looking at the overall ecosystem. I look at where you're positioned in the market, who's your Microsoft account team, what's your value to that Microsoft account team, what other competitive products do you have, what are your projects going forward, what's your Azure consumption, what's your AWS or GCP consumption, what's happening with Dynamics, what's happening with Power BI. Um, you need to ask yourselves the bigger questions. If you get stuck down only on optimization and on E5, you've already lost the negotiations. And over the years, I found that there's always something. There is always leverage, and it's not always the standard go to E5, what used to be Office, Office plus Windows plus, I don't know, Corel back in the days. That's not the discussion. If you've got no leverage in optimization, go back to fundamentals. That's my suggestion. and there will be something that you can bring to the table. There always is.
A very good question for you, Daryl. What is the partner where you are bought into the MSFT ecosystem, assuming it becomes much more about negotiations, T's and C's, price protection, SKU, price lock-in, investment incentives on Copilot migration, anything else in your experience that can be an effective strategy? So what is the partner if you're already bought in and locked in?
So actually, that goes back to my previous answer. Let's look at the bigger picture. It's there is something there. I don't know in which geography you are, what your sector is. Are there key projects that you want to roll out with Microsoft that Microsoft wants to maybe have a testimonial from you, a case study? I'm throwing something out there. Do your executives have a relationship with Microsoft that you can maybe leverage? Um, you can maybe utilize your reseller as a back channel to Microsoft. You can feed your reseller with various information that can impact the negotiations. Who are your what competitive products do you have around compliance? Do you have around security? Again, go back to Azure, GCP, AWS, third-party suppliers. There is something there. I'm sure about it. You need to just expand your view. That's what I'm saying. If you stay with the standard go-to Microsoft approach in 2025, you are into a lose-lose negotiation. Sorry, lose-win. Lose for you, win to Microsoft.
Thank you for that view, Daryl. So, question from Jacob. How about a new company with 2,000 employees? Will they be forced to make an MCA-E? They will be forced to make a CSP.
I was going to say, it's probably going to be pushed to a CSP initially.
CSP.
That's my own take. Again, depending if it's a direct or indirect market, there are still indirect markets, quite a few out there. I would say you're going to be pushed. You're going to be diverted to a CSP agreement, less flexibility, less negotiations. But again, I want to just be very cautious. It's about how you position yourself and when you position this new company of 2,000 employees. You need to find the right account team depending on which market you're in. There are different geographies work differently. You can have a different result if you are negotiating in Norway or if you are negotiating in Turkey. You can have a different result if you're negotiating in Finland or if you're negotiating in France. Looking back at the European market, not going too far all the way to Turkey. Or it can even be as far as different regions in the US. Who is your account team and in which region you are within the US? It's going to have an impact on somebody's bottom line. You need to find the right person to talk to it in Microsoft. So it's a lot to do about geography. Depends what sector that 2,000 users are. Are you bringing Azure into the play? Are you a big cloud user? I don't know. Maybe you're a multi-million dollar, $40-50 million a year cloud Azure user. That's your consumption, or maybe AWS. Do you need E5? Do you need E3? Do you need Copilot? So I'm just saying it might just be that you can still enroll into an EA quickly. Maybe that is your go-to. But again, CSP is not a bad option. Don't misunderstand me. There's less negotiation on a CSP, and it's channel driven.
I want to mention just before the closing remarks, very quickly, maybe 2 minutes, Azure Hybrid use benefits. So Daryl mentioned that servers are not interesting for the Microsoft anymore. You can't use them as a leverage. And the other thing that Daryl said is what you can do there, you can optimize. And one of the things still, I mean, we keep saying this in almost every event, Azure Hybrid use benefit is not correctly understood. We have two extremes. One is it's not used, and we just recently had a conversation when we stopped the organization from canceling their licenses. They don't need them on premise anymore, but they're a massive Azure client. So they could, instead of canceling software assurance on Windows Server Standard product, you'll see that in your customer price sheets. Everybody has it. They were about to cancel thousands and thousands of cores, but they consume even more in Azure. And it's not a secret, at least for those who've been in this for a while, the discount you get by using your own licenses of the Azure costs of virtual machines could be up to, only on the licensing portion, not everything, up to 95%. It's crazy. It's very big. So before you renew, before you provide Microsoft with the numbers for the bill of material, look at your Azure consumption of your virtual machines and think what licenses you may bring to Azure that will reduce your costs. Don't make that mistake. You're going to be paying more ultimately because there's no way back. You cancel them, there's no way back. Really, that's it. Yeah, there is, but it's going to cost you double at least. So it's not a good idea. And on the other hand, what we see is that some and who manages that? Cloud managers. And with no disrespect to cloud managers, they don't understand licensing. So they see that's an option to reduce cost. They tick the box, we have a license, without actually verifying that there are licenses. So it's the other extreme. And therefore, they tell Microsoft, we have thousands and thousands of licenses. Guess what? Microsoft knows that you don't. So right now, and I think it may not even change, so it's a risk that I would say it's a medium risk. Right now, Microsoft is not pursuing that, even in enterprise audits. However, who said that they won't do it starting tomorrow? Because they have all the numbers. They have your enterprise agreements. They have all your other agreements. They know where your tenant is. It's a simple click of a button to compare the two numbers between themselves, and there you find yourself in a non-compliant situation. So tighten down your Azure Hybrid Use benefit. If you're not using it right now, start using it. It will reduce your costs before negotiation. You don't even have to negotiate that. It's a quick win that doesn't require the headache of going into a negotiation room and talking to people and trying to convince them to give you better discount. So yeah, Daryl, 2 minutes, closing statement, please.
Make sure that your budget for Microsoft in 2025 is accurate. Don't underestimate your increased costs. Prepare your executive management team for what is coming, and you need to up your game coming the next round of negotiations. It is not the same as you negotiated 3 years ago or 5 years ago if you had a 5-year agreement. Prepare for it ahead of time and think out of the box. Go back to the fundamentals of how you prepare and how you strategize and what are your alternatives. And there are alternatives. There always is something that you can bring to the table.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Daryl. Thank you very much, everybody who participated today. Thanks for your chat questions. Apologies that I think we haven't answered one or two. We can try and take them after this event, especially if you sent that question through LinkedIn. We'll get back to you. Thanks again. We are live almost every second Wednesday. Please just follow us if you're not following us yet. And look for our new events. The next event we're going to have is in 2 weeks from now, and we're going to talk about 5 quick wins to reduce Azure consumption in the next 30 to 90 days, something that you can do almost immediately and significantly slash your Azure bill. And we're going to have our chief cloud expert, Stefan Dunk, on that one. Thanks again. Goodbye, everyone, and let's cue the music.
Thank you, everyone.